Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Thursday, March 5th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. In Riverside, expect a high of 72.1 degrees today, with the temperature cooling to a low of 42.6 degrees tonight. On today's program, we are examining why Wall Street firms are heavily investing in potential Supreme Court tariff refunds. We will also explore the ongoing standoff between Congress and the Justice Department concerning the release of files associated with Jeffrey Epstein. Beyond those headlines, we will have a look at several other stories developing across the nation. There is a lot to cover as we break down the complexities behind these issues and what they mean for the economy and government accountability. Stay tuned as we bring you all the details on these stories and more on Alex's News. Good morning. I am Grace, and we are starting today, March 5th, 2026, with a massive financial shift on Wall Street. A recent Supreme Court ruling has opened up a $180 billion refund vacuum that elite hedge funds are now rushing to fill. Joining us to break down this intersection of constitutional law and high-stakes finance is our reporter Ethan. Ethan, how did we get to a point where billions of dollars in taxpayer money are suddenly up for grabs?
It all started about 2 weeks ago on February 20th when the Supreme Court handed down a landmark decision in a case called Learning Resources, Incorporated versus Trump. The court ruled 6-3 that the sweeping Liberation Day tariffs imposed back in April of 2025 were actually unconstitutional. According to reports from NPR and analysts at Brookings, the administration tried to use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 to levy these duties. However, the justices decided that because tariffs are technically taxes, only Congress has the power to create them under the Constitution.
So the government now owes these companies a massive amount of money, but they do not have a way to pay it back yet?
That is exactly the problem, because the Treasury Department is currently sitting on an obligation that ranges anywhere from $175 billion to $500 billion. While major brands like Ralph Lauren and Mattel won the legal battle, the administration has not established a formal mechanism to actually distribute the refunds. The Washington Post reports that this delay has created a massive liquidity crisis for thousands of American importers who already paid those fees. Because these businesses cannot wait years for the government to act, they are looking for immediate cash elsewhere.
Is this where the hedge funds and institutional investors come into the picture?
Wall Street has moved incredibly fast to fill this void through a strategy that traders are calling tariff refund arbitrage. According to the Wall Street Journal, these investment firms are treating the legal claims for refunds as if they are distressed credit assets. They are essentially buying the right to a future government check from struggling companies at a massive discount. It's a way for a business to get some money today instead of waiting for a full payout that might take 5 years.
How much of a discount are we talking about for a business that needs cash right now?
Right after the ruling in late February, these claims were trading for as little as 20 to 40 cents on the dollar. NPR reports that as of today, March 5th, the average price for a claim has climbed up to about 45 cents on the dollar. We are seeing some extreme cases, like the toy maker Kids 2, which reportedly sold a $15 million claim to a hedge fund for only $2 million. That is only about 13 cents on the dollar, but it gave them the immediate cash they needed to stay in business.
That sounds like a huge potential profit for those investors if the government eventually pays out the full amount.
It is a massive opportunity that has firms like Seaport Global seeing huge influxes of interest from their wealthiest clients. Wes Harrell of Seaport Global told NPR that they have seen inquiries into these specific trades reach as high as $1 billion. Financial experts from Jefferies and Oppenheimer suggest the total market for these claims could eventually exceed $40 billion. They argue that these funds are providing essential liquidity to small importers that would otherwise face insolvency while waiting on the Treasury.
Even if it provides liquidity, are lawmakers worried about Wall Street profiting so much from a government refund?
There is a significant amount of political backlash brewing on Capitol Hill right now, led by Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts. Yesterday, March 4th, The senator sent a formal letter to officials like SEC Chairman Paul Atkins and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick demanding an investigation. Senator Markey said, quote, "The administration's delay has allowed investment banks to fleece Main Street," end quote. He is concerned that while giant corporations like Federal Express can wait for the courts, small businesses are being pressured into bad deals.
Has there been any legislative movement to try and speed up these payments to the actual businesses?
Senator Markey and several of his colleagues just introduced the Tariff Refund Act of 2026 to address this specific vacuum. This bill would force U.S. Customs and Border Protection to issue full refunds with interest within 180 days. It specifically prioritizes small businesses to ensure they do not feel forced to sell their claims to hedge funds for pennies. However, the bill faces a very difficult path in a Senate where the Republican majority has already referred it to the Finance Committee.
If the politicians are stuck in a stalemate, is there anything the court system can do to move the money faster?
The judiciary is already starting to lose patience with the administration's requests for more time to process these claims. Yesterday, Judge Richard Eaton of the U.S. Court of International Trade established a new procedural framework to handle the $180 billion. He ruled that the relief must apply to all importers of record, not just the ones who originally filed lawsuits. This is a huge win for smaller companies that did not have the money for expensive lawyers over the last year.
Does this new framework from Judge Eaton include a timeline for when the checks might actually start arriving?
The judge ordered Customs and Border Protection to reliquidate many of these entries within a 90-day window. This means the government has to recalculate the costs and return the money at the original pre-tariff rates. The government has already conceded that they will likely owe post-judgment interest on all of that held capital. Analysts estimate that this interest alone could cost American taxpayers roughly $700 million every single month until the refunds are finished.
Is there anything the administration can do at this point to stop the money from leaving the Treasury?
They are currently testing a very controversial legal strategy known as the passing on defense in the lower courts. The administration argues that many of these importers already passed the cost of the tariffs onto consumers by raising their prices. They claim that giving a full refund to the company now would result in an unfair corporate windfall, or what they call unjust enrichment. However, legal experts say this defense is rarely successful because it is very difficult to prove exactly how much a price hike was tied to a tariff.
It seems like a complicated mess, especially with the president already announcing a new set of tariffs to replace the old ones.
That is the big complication we are seeing today, which many are calling the Trump pivot. Within hours of the court ruling on February 20th, the president invoked Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. He used that law to immediately impose a new 15% emergency global tariff as a bridge measure. Major companies like Costco and L'Oreal have already filed new lawsuits, arguing this is just an unconstitutional attempt to bypass the Supreme Court.
So while the hedge funds are betting on the old refunds, these companies are already fighting a whole new battle?
Exactly, and that is why this has become such a sophisticated game for the biggest players on Wall Street. For the hedge funds that bought those claims at 20 cents on the dollar, the new court mandates could lead to a multi-billion-dollar windfall. Meanwhile, the federal budget is now facing a massive hole for the 2026 and 2027 fiscal cycle. Consumers might not see prices drop anytime soon because the legal battle over these Liberation Day duties is far from over.
It is incredible how a single court case can create an entire new industry for distressed debt overnight. What is the next big date we should be watching for in this saga?
Tomorrow, March 6th, Judge Eaton has summoned federal counsel to a conference to finalize the automatic administrative plan for the payouts. That meeting will likely determine if the government can continue to delay or if the floodgates for those billions will finally open. We will also be watching to see if the SEC responds to Senator Markey's request to look into the hedge fund practices. It is a fast-moving situation that is fundamentally changing how Wall Street views the outcomes of Supreme Court cases.
We will certainly keep a close eye on that conference tomorrow. Ethan, thank you so much for the detailed reporting on this.
You are very welcome, Grace.
We have been tracking the fallout from the Jeffrey Epstein investigation for years, but it feels like we finally hit a massive turning point yesterday. Chloe, what can you tell us about this high-stakes vote that went down in the House Oversight Committee?
It was an incredibly tense afternoon on Capitol Hill, Grace. Yesterday, on March 4th, the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee voted 24-19 to officially subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi. As ABC News reports, they are demanding she explain exactly why the Justice Department is still withholding millions of documents related to the Epstein network.
A vote like that usually falls right down party lines, but I heard there was some surprising movement from the Republican side of the aisle. Was this actually a bipartisan effort?
It really was, and that is what makes this moment so significant for the investigation. 5 Republicans, including Nancy Mace and Lauren Boebert, joined every single Democrat on the committee to authorize this subpoena. According to PBS News, Representative Mace has been the most vocal, saying the American people deserve the truth regardless of who it might embarrass.
That is a very rare bit of unity for Washington these days. What is the specific legal argument they are using to force the Attorney General's hand?
The whole conflict centers on the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which was signed into law back on November 19, 2025. The Washington Post reports that this law actually overrides the usual privacy protections the Justice Department uses to keep files secret. It specifically says the government cannot hide information just because it might cause reputational harm or political sensitivity for public figures.
So the law was designed to prevent exactly what the committee is now accusing the Justice Department of doing. Did the department miss an official deadline for these releases?
They absolutely did, as the law required every single unclassified record to be produced by December 19th of last year. While the department did release 3,500,000 pages in January, critics say the rollout was intentionally messy and incomplete. Democracy Docket notes that lawmakers are now calling the entire process a fumbled attempt to comply with the letter of the law while ignoring its spirit.
I remember hearing about a massive batch of files that suddenly disappeared from the public archive just a few weeks ago. What happened to those 47,000 documents?
That is a major point of contention for the committee right now. In late February, the Justice Department pulled 47,635 files, which is about 65,500 pages, right off the internet. A spokesperson for the department told the Wall Street Journal that they had to do it because of botched redactions that exposed the names of nearly 100 survivors.
That sounds like a valid privacy concern, but are the lawmakers actually buying that explanation?
They aren't, because many of those pulled files had nothing to do with survivors. As CBS News points out, the department also removed Epstein's jail logs and photos of his cell from the public database. Representative Robert Garcia has been very blunt about it, saying he believes Attorney General Bondi is, quote, orchestrating a cover-up for the White House, end quote.
That is a heavy accusation to level against the nation's top law enforcement officer. Is there one specific document or piece of evidence that seems to be the smoking gun for the committee?
They are very focused on 3 missing FBI interview summaries from 2019. NPR and The Guardian report that these documents involve a woman who claimed she was assaulted by both Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump back in the mid-1980s. The committee says the FBI interviewed her 4 times, but the public archive only included one summary where she didn't mention Trump's name.
So the committee believes the Justice Department is cherry-picking which interviews the public gets to see.
That is exactly what they are alleging. The Justice Department has fired back, calling these specific allegations, quote, unfounded and sensationalist, end quote. However, the committee argues that, under the new transparency law, the department doesn't get to decide what is relevant. They are legally required to release even the uncorroborated claims so the public can see the full scope of the original investigation.
Beyond just paperwork and interview notes, there has been talk about actual physical evidence like tapes and flight logs. Are those part of this subpoena as well?
Yes, and Representative Mace has been particularly aggressive about those items. She says the department is sitting on audio and video recordings captured by pinhole cameras that Epstein had hidden all over his various properties. There is also the issue of the complete flight logs for his private jet, which many people famously call the Lolita Express.
We have also seen some very big names from both parties getting pulled into this probe recently. How did the depositions with the Clintons go last week?
Those were handled behind closed doors, but we are starting to get a sense of what was said. PBS News reports that former President Bill Clinton denied having any knowledge of the crimes Epstein committed during their friendship. His wife, Hillary Clinton, reportedly testified that she had no memory of ever meeting Epstein at all, despite records showing their paths crossed.
It seems like those depositions only raised more questions for the investigators. What about the situation with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick?
That has become a real headache for the administration. For a long time, Lutnick claimed he cut ties with Epstein back in 2005, but documents recently cited by The Guardian show he actually visited Epstein's private island, Little St. James, in 2012. It turns out he even co-invested in a tech company with Epstein and was talking to him about museum projects as late as 2018.
It is incredible how these files are completely rewriting the stories these public figures have told for years. How is Attorney General Bondi responding to all of this pressure?
She has been very combative so far and shows no signs of backing down. She has dismissed her critics on the committee as being washed up and insists her department is doing the best it can with such a massive volume of data. She maintains that processing 3 million pages in such a short time frame is an unprecedented task that was bound to have some technical hiccups.
If she decides to ignore the subpoena and refuses to sit for a deposition, what can the committee actually do to her?
They have a few different options, but none of them are simple. As the experts at Just Security explain, the House could vote to hold her in criminal contempt, which would refer her to her own department for prosecution. That is usually a dead end, because the Justice Department rarely agrees to prosecute its own leader.
That sounds like a massive conflict of interest. Are there any other paths that might actually lead to a courtroom?
There is a federal law known as 18 U.S.C. Section 2071 that could come into play. It makes it a felony to willfully conceal or destroy government records. If they can prove she is intentionally hiding files, she could face prison time and be disqualified from holding any federal office in the future.
And I would imagine the word impeachment has started to come up in some of these committee meetings as well.
It has, especially from Representative R.O. Khanna. He has stated that articles of impeachment are the last resort if the department continues to stonewall the investigation. For now, they are hoping the threat of a civil lawsuit under the Transparency Act will be enough to get the records released without a full-blown constitutional crisis.
It is a high-stakes game of chicken between the two branches of government. Chloe, thank you for breaking down where this stands today on March 5th. We will be watching for the Justice Department's next move.
You're welcome, Grace. I suspect we will hear a lot more about this before the week is over.
Here are some other headlines. Beijing is officially tapping the brakes on its economic engine as Premier Li Qiang announced a growth target of 4.5 to 5% for the year 2026. It is the first time since 1991, excluding the 2020 pandemic anomaly, that the Great Wall of Growth has dipped below the 5% mark. This, proactive and pragmatic, pivot prioritizes high-tech toys like artificial intelligence, 6G, and robotics over the raw construction of the past. While some might say China is navigating a grave and complex landscape of property slumps and deflationary pressures, officials are aiming for a controlled glide into their 15th five-year plan, even with a budget deficit target of 4% to keep the fiscal fire burning. This shift signals a departure from the around 5% goal of previous years as the world's second-largest economy trades its export-heavy diet for a side of domestic consumption and technological sovereignty. Moving to the Midwest, the North Star State is seeing red over a green issue. Minnesota officials have filed a federal lawsuit against the Trump administration to unlock $243 million in Medicaid funds. Vice President J.D. Vance put the freeze on those funds, citing concerns over systemic fraud, but Attorney General Keith Ellison is calling foul, claiming the move is arbitrary and capricious and a form of political punishment. This legal shot in the arm, aims to protect medical assistance for 1,200,000 residents, including 42% of the state's children. The 7% budget cut could force a scale back for veterans and those with disabilities. Defendants in the case include Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. and CMS Administrator Mehmet Oz, making this a real Oz behind the curtain moment just days before Governor Tim Walz was set to testify before the House Oversight Committee. In the Sunshine State, a federal judge has cast some shade on Governor Ron DeSantis. Judge Mark E. Walker issued a preliminary injunction blocking an executive order that labeled the Council on American Islamic Relations and the Muslim Brotherhood as foreign terrorist organizations. The judge ruled that the governor cannot use his office to make political statements at the cost of the First Amendment. It seems Walker is walking the walk when it comes to constitutional rights, providing immediate relief to Florida's 500,000 Muslim residents. The legal challenge, led by the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Muslim Legal Fund of America, argued that Florida was trying to usurp federal power to designate terrorists. On a somber note, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, a coltonly devastating disaster has struck the Rubaya mine. Heavy rains triggered a landslide at the Gasasa quarry, killing more than 200 people, including approximately 70 children. This site, which accounts for 15% of the world's coltan production, is a primary revenue source for the M23 rebels, who reportedly earn $800,000 monthly from taxing the site. While the rebels claim only 5 or 6 died, the government's Ministry of Mines reports a much grimmer reality in an area already designated a red zone. It is a rocky situation for the global supply chain of smartphones and electric vehicles, especially following a similar collapse in late January. Finally, Operation Epic Fury has reached a fever pitch as the conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran enters its 6th day. Iranian missiles have been raining down on Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, while Israeli forces are delivering waves of strikes on Tehran and Beirut. With Iran's supreme leader reportedly dead and over 1,000 civilians killed, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is hoping to wing it as a mediator. As the U.S. accelerates its campaign following the sinking of an Iranian warship, and retaliatory strikes hit energy hubs in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, the world is watching to see if diplomacy can finally drill through the tension. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.